Hello everyone listening, welcome to Talkin Design Down Under. I am Keith D. Franks III, your host from the Australian Tabletop Gaming Network, and with me today is special guest Shaun Sunday. Say hello, Shaun.
Hey!
So, tell us, what inspired your interest in board games instead of the current market leader, video games, and what brought you to board gaming?
That's really a good question. I've been into board games since I was a kid. I did play video games a bit when I was in high school, mostly on the PC. I didn't have a console or anything. But once I sort of moved out of home, I think it was probably more a matter of finance than anything. But also, I just kind of instinctively steered away from getting too involved with video games because I didn't realize at the time, but with my ADHD, I can have a tendency to hyper-focus on them and they just take up a lot of time. A combination of how expensive consoles and keeping up with the cost of games is versus buying a board game that you can replay with new people over and over and over again, and also that trying not to get too absorbed into video games at the expense of other things around me, I think really did it for me. But also, like, my real interest in heavier games got it in when I got into Hero Quest in school. I got given a copy by my brother-in-law, and I loved it. I was so into it, played it with my mates all the time, and that really got me interested in sort of board games with a theme and a narrative that I could really get into with friends.
Okay, what was the transition like from Hero Quest to Dungeons and Dragons?
Well, it was interesting. It was obviously D&D is a lot more involved, but I do often recommend Hero Quest to people as like baby's first D&D, because you start getting used to the idea of having a character sheet, keeping a track of your abilities, and rolling for successes and failures and things like that. But then when I finally started playing D&D in 2018, it was a big change because there was so much more involved, but it wasn't too much of a system shock because I had some experience managing games.
Yeah, fair enough. What got you started in working in the tabletop industry?
Well, I've always been an artist since I was like 12. I started drawing, and my partner and I were looking at starting a business together, doing our art and doing my prop making and costuming and stuff like that. One of my friends was working on a game at the time, and I was helping him play test it, and I sort of just had a couple of ideas for some things that I'd like to try out. And from that day, and as we started doing the NIS program, Squirrel Wars was born.
Right.
And that was in 2016. And obviously on and off, I had to stop working on it because of day jobs and time frames and all that sort of stuff. But it really sort of inspired me to give it a crack. And as it started to come together, I thought it really grabbed my attention and played to all of my strengths. So I was like, I think I could do this.
Yeah, it's interesting because Squirrel Wars was how I first met you at PAX, I want to say last year or the year before.
It was last year, yeah.
Last year. And it's interesting that's because usually in the tabletop industry, when you meet someone, you know them by their project rather than their name half the time, or both. And what's interesting to me is that it's not Squirrel Wars is the thing that has come out recently. It's actually your D&D screen resource, which actually was really successful quite recently.
Yeah, it was nice to, while I'm still developing my major project, have something a bit smaller that I could bust out. It was something that I got really passionate about because my group was struggling with D&D and remembering the rules and everything. I was having a hard enough time remembering everything I needed to know as the DM, let alone helping everybody else remember.
And with a book in front of you, and everything, exactly.
Yeah, so I decided to have a crack at that, and I thought it would be a nice starter project because it was low risk. There wasn't a lot of moving parts to worry about, and I could get that out while I continued the development of Squirrel Wars.
Well, doing all the art yourself too saves a lot of cost in putting it together.
Yeah, exactly. It was a good challenge as an artist and a designer And I was obviously still in the playtesting stage of Squirrel Wars, but sort of the final round, PAX really helped me to collect all the data I need so that I can finish that this year. But I wasn't ready to finish it yet.
I totally get you there. It's actually funny. A friend of mine, Sean Fallon, gave me similar advice. And I came to him initially when I first started designing board games with a huge game called Cutlass. And he was like, no, don't do that. Do something small so you can figure out what you're doing and then come back to the bigger idea later. Rather than spending hours and hours and so much money in building this thing, and then you might not be able to, for whatever reason, get it to fulfillment or get it onto tables because of budget, marketing, or whatever. I did a similar thing. I had Castles of Kalira, which is a pocket-sized game, come out, would be almost 3 years ago now, and it was reasonably successful. And it's in the same way, it gave me the opportunity to figure out what that roadmap looks like and push on in the next way. And hopefully that's going to do the same thing for you, be able to build that Kickstarter journey for Squirrel Wars.
Yeah, and that's kind of it. That's why I'm sort of doing Dueling Dungeons more than Squirrel Wars right now as well.
Right, I did see that. That's you were saying you had just gotten a prototype from the Game Crafter, I believe?
Yeah, I got a couple of prototypes made up by the same people that made my screens for me.
Okay.
So that I could see what quality their cards were like. And I also entered it into the Proto ATL contest.
That's
so
right.
I bought a prototype off the Game Crafter as well, so I could get photos for that and to see what their quality was like for both this project and future projects, because I've got a few things I want to try out with the Game Crafter's print-on-demand capabilities. So that was really cool. Unfortunately, due to all the shipping delays and everything like that at the moment, that prototype is already obsolete.
Yep.
I've done a fair bit of playtesting with Robin and some friends with the prototypes from the guys that made my screen for me, and picked up a few things that can already use improvements. So it's a really nice keepsake, so I'm still really glad that I got it, and it lets me see the quality of what the Game Crafter can do, which is really solid stuff. But I'm hoping to get that ready for Kickstarter by about November.
Okay,
and then Squirrel Wars shouldn't be too far behind. Because it's actually a really fairly simple game.
Okay.
And I started this one in 2017, put it on the back burner for a while because I thought I'd broken it, which I kind of had, and I was focusing on wrapping things up with our costuming business and focusing a bit more on getting Squirrel Wars to a playable state. Then I had a brainwave early 2019 or late 2018, I think, and sort of unbroke it. It still wasn't done, but it was playable. And so it's been a bit of a steady design journey from then. I got a prototype ready just in time for PAX, but unfortunately it didn't get into the collaborative. So I put it on the back burner while I focused on getting Squirrel Wars play tested over the weekend. Okay. And then after we came back in early January to February, I started working on the next update to Dueling Dungeons. And that's where we are now. So I think I'll be able to get that finished this year, because it's really quite a simple game. It's only a 2-player, very rules-light sort of game. And it's something that I wanted to do, again, while I'm working on Squirrel Wars, because I'm doing all the artwork. It's going to take a while to finish it.
Sounds like it. So
Squirrel Wars is definitely a much more component-heavy game, so there's going to be a lot of artwork to do for that.
Yeah, and before you move on too far, it sounds like you're using a pick-up, put-down workflow where in between opportunities to do things for Squirrel Wars, you're able to pick up other projects and then put them down, and PAX being the decider for when that was going to happen, switching from Dueling Dungeons back to Squirrel Wars and so forth. Do you have a way that you manage your workflow, or is it I'm about to fall asleep and just got a fantastic idea and now I have to work on this project, or how's that really come together for you?
It's a little of column A, a little of column B. Depending on how much work I've got on at the time, what I might have a deadline for, or what is easier to accomplish. I cycle projects because of my ADHD, so it's really difficult for me to focus on one project consistently, even if it's something that I really like, because of executive dysfunction. If there's just something I'm having a difficulty with, my brain will switch off and I won't be able to continue for a while. So I tend to have a bunch of projects on the go all at the same time. At the moment, I've sort of been focusing primarily on 2 projects. which is this comic I'm working on, and the paper minis to go with the player screen. But during the time before I picked up the comic, I was cycling between Dueling Dungeons and the paper minis to sort of keep that focus going and get Dueling Dungeons up to a point where I could playtest it. So now that it's been up to that point, I've just sort of let it sit for a while I send out print and play copies to people, and then I've been focusing on the other project. It's sort of a matter of getting up every day and going, right, what can I do today?
Yeah.
Or what is achievable today? What is achievable this month? What needs to be done first? And then sort of going from there.
Okay, that sounds a lot more organized than me, honestly. I have something similar. I also pick up, put down a lot, but the way that I pick up, put down is not up to me. I am juggling so many projects. This podcast is now an extra one. And rather than planning time in advance, I let the job come to me, so to speak. For example, I'm working with the manufacturer at the moment. I'm working with some artists at the moment, and I obviously can't do anything until I hear from them about what's ready to go, what's actionable. So I kind of have a to-do list, which is me waiting for people to tell me to do things. And so I've gotten used to, I have to do this now. I'm doing this now. It is done. Okay. And I now have free time because I've just done the thing, and I go back to doing nothing, which means I do a lot of nothing, but I'm also exactly productive when I can be.
Yeah. Yep, it's a bit like that too. So my method sounds a lot more organized than it is. Like, it is chaos. I'm literally working on about 15 projects right now.
Yeah, I know how you feel.
I work on a little bit here and there, so I don't get anything finished for really long stretches. But then all of a sudden, bam, 5 things are published all at once.
All right, so
I just chip away at them over time.
Yeah,
and thankfully, because mostly I work for myself and not with too many other people, I can mostly just pick up and put down at will. I'm not waiting for stuff too much.
All right, so I have this big question that I was thinking about the other day. I think I'm probably going to end up asking a lot of people that come on here. If you could have access to any movie intellectual property for a board game adaptation, what would it be?
That's a really good question, actually.
I know, and there's so many good choices out there, and a lot of them will be stuff that you could just never get, obviously.
Yeah.
For me, while you're thinking on it, the other day, I was like, it would be amazing to make The Quiet Place, that movie that came out recently from John Krasinski. Especially now that there's a sequel coming out. And just the premise of the movie already lends itself to board game mechanics, like managing noise and whatever. So I'm like, this is something I want to do, but we'll never be able to do.
Yeah, no, I get what you mean. For me, there's actually kind of 2.
Okay.
Because a while back, it hasn't come out yet, but a while back I did an episode of Dice Hard with Alex and Ben.
Yep.
And we did... I just had been watching it, so I was like, no, this sounds like a really dumb and fun idea. So I binge-watched XXX, The Return of Xander Cage.
Oh, yeah.
And then we sat down and we created a card game based off that. And the game actually ended up seeming like it would be more fun than the movie was.
I believe it.
You would think that a movie with like Vin Diesel, Donnie Yen, Tony Jaa, and all the rest in it would be really exciting. It actually ended up being not that great. They really underused each of those actors and fighters.
Yeah.
But the premise was really fun. And so we ended up coming up with a really silly game, which at some point I am going to actually go back through, listen to what we did, make it as a free print and play just for the sake of practice. But if I could get the rights to actually make it, I would.
For sure.
And the other one for me is actually already an existing game, but I would love to have the rights to revamp and expand it, which is Hero Quest.
Of course. I could have seen that coming.
I love Hero Quest, and I would love to actually have the rights to redo it completely, redesign everything, still keeping a bit of that classic feel, but modernize it a little bit and just expand on it a little bit more, give your characters a few extra things that they can do, and just add more stories to it so that it can be a bit more of an expansive game.
And all fresh artwork, no less.
Yeah, well, yeah, that too. Definitely keep that HeroQuest feel, but fresh artwork of my own. I would love to have a crack at that.
Of course. All right, so now the big question, and why I specifically have you on the show, is I want to talk about accessibility, because you've been doing a lot to help people in board games with accessibility. And ordinarily, the question I have written in my notes is, what are you doing to leave your mark on the tabletop industry? And with you, it's a bit more obvious because your work has been very successful with the player screen, and you've been doing some talks and a panel you were working on, you said, about accessibility. I'd love to hear more about it.
Okay, yeah, so that's kind of my thing is, one, I make the games that I want to play. I'm not designing for anyone else. So that's kind of a thing for me, is my goal in the tabletop industry, is to make the stuff that I want to see in the world, and then people that like it will find it. But as far as everything else and make sure, my impact on the industry is that I want to spread more awareness of and help people design for the accessibility of neurodiversities. So that's what the panel that I've applied for PAX is going to be about. It's going to be about helping people understand what neurodiversities are and how they can affect people, and ways that we can improve accessibility both in our game design and in table behavior, so that people can have an easier time playing games, and also ways to combat ableism with positive change, rather than negative things like reprimanding people and telling them they're wrong or what they're doing is bad. I want to help people learn how to have the uncomfortable conversation about what ableism is and why that thing they just did is ableist, but in a positive way, and show them what they can do to do something happy and helpful and beneficial instead. Because a lot of people, unfortunately, just with the way that society is geared, have a lot of ableist preconceived behaviors and notions, and they don't even realize. Like, good people can accidentally be ableist. You can be the kindest person in the world, but just because of the way that the workplace is geared, media presents itself, you can have a bunch of preconceived behaviors and ideas in your head that are ableist, and you don't even know until somebody points it out. And unfortunately, a lot of people, when you point out that what they're doing is ableist, it's a shock to their system, and they rail against it really hard and they get upset. So it can be really difficult to have that conversation.
Yeah, and I know what you mean, and especially with media and with what's happening these days, a lot of people are really struggling to have that conversation, and it would be a lot easier just to be like, hey, this sucked, this is a better way to do this, or this is a more comfortable replacement. And it's a conversation I don't see often enough when it comes to design. A lot of what we see most recently when it comes to accessibility is stuff like color blindness, dealing with regular blindness. Like, for example, nyctophobia is probably one of the best things we've seen recently in that category. But we don't get often opportunities to talk about how we're actually interacting with other players and stuff like that, which I think is an interesting take on it.
And that's what I want to address especially, is table behavior, because like I see so often, if for RPG specifically, and even just board game nights, when people are talking about running their game nights, they talk about problem players, so to speak.
Yeah.
And often than not, it's not a problem player. They're just getting mad at someone for having their phone or a secondary activity at the table. And now, honestly, a lot of the time, that's going to turn out to be somebody with, whether it's diagnosed or not, ADHD or autism, that is either trying to work off their extra energy and focus with the ADHD so that they can concentrate on what's happening. Or if they're with the autism, there's a thing when they're in a socially anxious situation, there's stimming, which helps them work off the anxiety and calm themselves down and reassure themselves.
With a controlled activity. Yeah, this is something that I've heard a lot about for managing anxiety, especially in social situations like Dungeons and Dragons. When it calls upon you to do something specifically, or players require something of you, and you're either not prepared, or you're anxious because you don't know that you can do that, or it feels like a lot is required of you. Especially when you have that one guy that expects everyone to be like Matt Mercer and everything is a performance rather than just here to play a game. I'm sure there's plenty of those people out there. And there's a lot of people.
Sorry.
No, I was just saying it can make it hard. I am agreeing with you.
Yeah. It really can. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that run tables, whether it's for board games or role-playing games, that are of the your attention is on me at all times sort of expectation. And that's just not possible for a lot of neurodiverse people. For ADHD, our brains are understimulated. So if we're only doing one thing and trying to focus on that one thing, that's not going to work. Our brains are going to be jumping all over the place. I can be staring someone smack in the eyes and trying really, really hard to listen to what they're saying. And inside my head, my brain's just like, nope, this is that. Oh, don't forget you got to do this later. Oh, what's that behind them? And by the time they've finished a sentence, you've forgotten what they've said.
Yeah.
But a way to combat that is to, fidget toys, have a something repetitive like a puzzle game on your phone, have a sketchbook by your side. So you're sketching idly, because that provides stimulation in the background to your brain, and then you can actually focus on what's happening in front of you. I can't sit through a movie without sketching. Otherwise, that's it. If I go to the cinema, I forget half the movie by the time I walk out, because I can't do anything else to burn off that extra concentration.
Yeah, I'm right with you on that one. I tend to have Netflix on one monitor and I'm doing something minor on the other one, whether it's little work stuff in catching up with people, doing the social diligence of organising things, or playing games on mute.
Yep, exactly. That's it. And a lot of people, because they're not familiar with what ADHD, autism, dyslexia, and all the rest actually look like, they don't realise that that's what's going on. So unfortunately, because the media presents ADHD like one of two things. Either short-tempered, angry guy that's punching holes in walls, or the squirrel stereotype.
Yeah.
Which both are harmful and only present one experience of what the ADHD looks like and presents like. And it's different in every person with ADHD. We all have similar symptoms, but we all act differently. And it's especially different between assigned male and assigned female people. The brain chemistry works differently, and it actually presents very, very differently.
That's true. Actually, I've heard a bit about this myself as well. And from memory, assigned female is diagnosed way less because
because they're better at masking.
That's it. I remember reading about it.
Yeah. And often a lot assigned female people have the inattentive subtype more so than the hyperactive subtype.
Yeah.
So it looks different. Again, the two main subtypes look completely different as well. So that's why I'm doing the work that I'm putting together at the moment, is to start introducing people in a positive way to more information about what these are and how they can look at the gaming table, and just ways to make game night a little bit more accessible and inclusive to our neurodiverse friends.
Yeah, and I think that having the screen is a really easy way to do that, because it has a table presence, people are able to access it. But I would also like to see an evolution of that concept where, for example, in your Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook or DM's Guide, where you're looking through it and it says these are things to deal with, like these particular things, rather than, hey, this is an NPC that's talking to you, delivering dialogue or call to arms or whatever. It's like, this is also how to engage your players, this is also what you're doing. Or in a rule book for a board game, this is a way to manage things, stuff like analysis paralysis, all kinds of stuff, giving players the ability to handle time, interact with each other, building a game that is balanced for everyone's experience, rather than putting pressure on people to have to meet the challenge of everyone else's level, in a way.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You've got to be adaptable and able to just modify the presence at the table to suit everyone.
Yeah.
You can't assume that everyone is exactly like you.
That's the thing.
ADHD and autistic people especially have a really hard time learning a new game and retaining a new game. Even if it's a game that we play regularly, we're always going to forget something and need help remembering it.
I forget games I've made. and I'm trying to teach people how to play a game I've made.
Oh man, tell me about it. I keep forgetting rules to Squirrel Wars and Dueling Dungeons if I don't have them beside me.
Yeah.
And that's it. And that's exactly why I made the player screen, because it's got all the basics in a organized, cohesive format. So it's right in front of you. You don't forget to look at it. And we need to be more mindful of that sort of thing, both in terms of board game design and when running games at a table.
That's it. I think especially for designers, I think there's a big call to arms these days for a designer to not just make a game, but to curate an experience for its players. The screen is a great supplement for it, but it would be fantastic to see designers taking that initiative and building it into their game. It's like with color blindness options, with neurodiversity accessibility options. The only one that I've really been doing is reminder cards, and I've been really guilty of being lazy with everything else.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep an eye on these sort of things in my own design as well. Like for every rulebook that I make for standard sort of neurotypical ADHD-ish brains, I'll also be creating a PDF version with a very plain, high contrast and dyslexic friendly font.
Yeah.
That's also going to be screen reader accessible.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I think every single board game designer should be doing that. You don't have to provide two different printed versions necessarily, but you should have an accessible PDF that is black and white if needs be. For ease of reading, that's honestly probably best for dyslexic people, except for your pictures. If you need to have pictures, for example, of play, they can be color, but your font and design and stuff, high contrast, not a lot of distracting patterns and things like that. And if you can't afford to buy the license for one of the dyslexic specific fonts, then a lot of graphic designers are going to hate me saying this. Use Comic Sans.
Yeah.
Comic Sans is actually the most dyslexic friendly stock standard font that comes on everybody's word processors and everybody's Photoshop and stuff like that. It's the best one for dyslexia if you can't afford to buy one of the specifically crafted fonts. And you don't have to use that in your main rulebook. You know, if you've got an aesthetic and a design and everything, that's fine, make that. But also make that secondary digital version so that people can download it. That'll make it more accessible to people with limited vision as well, if it's screen reader friendly. And just that makes it a bit better for everybody to play.
Well, that's actually a really good idea. There's no reason why you can't have one really sexy rulebook that has all your fantastic backgrounds and art and graphic design and all of that in it, but then at the back have a whole bunch of QR codes for downloadables, access links for hundreds of different versions of it in every language, in any kind of accessibility tools you have the ability to create. Because there's no reason why you can't just have 100 or 200 or one for every single person. You know?
You could start with just that basic one for screen readers and dyslexia. That'll fit most neurodiverse people's needs. And then as you go to Kickstarter, you can have stretch goals where you can hire someone to create a Braille version if needs be. Hire someone to create a native German version, different languages and stuff like that. Obviously, not everyone's going to be able to afford to pay someone to do that. And I have seen many people working on accessibility say, do not use Google Translate for your rulebook.
Oh, jeez.
It will mess everything up.
Yeah, so I had a similar thing running the Castles of Calyria Kickstarter campaign. I actually had a whole bunch of people that messaged me and they were like, your game looks cool, can I translate it for you? And I'm sure there's people out there that will happily volunteer their time to do graphic design stuff or accessibility options as well. So, and when people are offering it for you and you say no, you're doing the wrong thing rather than just saying yes and letting your game be better.
No, exactly. Even if you don't think that you're going to have an international audience, but somebody says, I want to make an internationally accessible version of your game for you, take it. Give them $50, even if they're volunteering, just to say thank you.
Or a copy of the game. I found that a lot of people were very happy just to have their own copy of the game with a thank you in the rulebook somewhere or an update.
Exactly, because that's a credit. That's a translation credit that they can put onto their resume. Don't ask people to work for free But if someone is adamant that they just want to do that as a volunteer thing, give them a copy of your game and make sure they're credited as a translator and writer in the rulebook, because then they can use that to actually get paid work. Bare minimum, that's the right thing to do if you can't afford to pay them.
That's it. And like 100%, I would act as a reference for anyone that's done translation work for me. Torsten Sammet did 3 different languages for Castles of Calera from memory. Guy's a machine. Oh, nice. So I made sure he got a couple copies of the game. And that's, obviously me, again, doing the bare minimum because he approached me and everything like that and made it really easy. But yeah. I think it wouldn't be that hard for anyone with an upcoming Kickstarter campaign to, at the bottom somewhere, just before the big thank you section, to like, hey, look, if you are interested in helping us with big list of stuff that we don't have the resources for, send an email here and we'll see what we can organize.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Because a lot of people will be willing to help if they can see that people are putting in the work. And again, if you can afford to pay someone, pay them.
That's it.
100%. But if somebody just wants to help because they can see what you're doing, sure, take the help, but offer them a copy of your game. Same as I'm going to do when I'm ready to start doing alternate versions of the player screen. Like, I want to do it in other languages so that people can play D&D in other languages as well.
Yeah.
But it's also going to be a lot of work for me because once I get the translations, I still have to make everything fit.
Have to redo all the graphic design.
Exactly.
Translating into German is like 500 more characters than English.
Exactly.
So I know exactly what you're going through here.
Yeah, so that's a future project that I'll do at a later date, but it is definitely something that I want to do. And I am about to go through and do a redesign of the internals specifically for dyslexia.
Okay.
Because I used a fairly basic font that still looked nice, so it would be as friendly as possible while still maintaining my aesthetic. But I do actually want to go back through and do a proper dyslexic friendly only version of it as a digital version.
Okay.
And that's just a thing that you can go back, I've had the success now and I know now what I can do, and I can go back and redo that and release it as a digital product. Bam, done.
There's a market for it. Exactly.
So even if you can't do it for your first release, think about it while you're working on things and then release that as downloadable content later.
All right, we are almost out of time. Do you want to give us a quick run through on where people can find you and your projects?
For sure. On pretty much all social media, you can find me under some variant of Shaun Sunday art. My main platforms that I'm active on is Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can find my linktree on any of those platforms, which has links to my Etsy store, my Redbubble, and all of that sort of stuff. I've got gear all over the place. ShaunSunday.com is coming. It's currently just a landing page, but it will be a full portfolio soon. And if you find me on Twitter and tweet at me, you can get access to my Discord where I do playtesting, and I'll be doing live stream stuff via Discord, and you can help influence what I choose to do next and changes to existing products and accessibility work and all of that sort of thing via my Discord.
All right, sounds fantastic. Sounds like you got a lot going on, and I'm going to let you get back to it and wrap up this episode of Talkin Design Down Under. Thanks again for coming along, Shaun. It's been spectacular to have you on board, and I hope everyone goes into the description and clicks follow on every single one of these damn links I'm going to be posting there in a minute.
Thank you very much for having me, and good luck with all the other interviews and also with your own games.
Thanks again. All right, see you everyone.